Hey everybody, this is Captain Frugal reporting for duty, giving you my weekly comic book review. So sit back and enjoy.
News about comic books, musical instruments, tackle news and video games with your host, Captain Frugal.
Welcome back, comic book fans, and welcome back to the channel. Every week, a flood of comics hits the shelves, and it can be tough to decide what to pick up. But don't worry, that's what I'm here for. We're about to dive in to this week's releases to crown one book the comic of the week. Will it be an epic superhero showdown, a mind-bending indie darling, or maybe a hilarious new series that everyone has been talking about? I've read a stack of them, and I've got some strong opinions. So stick around to the very end to see which comic earned the top spot and why you absolutely need to add it to your collection. Feel free to drop your own picks in the comments below. I'd love to see what you're reading. So, let's get into it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more comic book reviews every week. Welcome back, everybody. I do apologize ahead of time if you hear any fan noise, because, you know, it gets hot as heck in here, and that's not good on a computer, so I want to make sure I have that fan running. I do try to knock out as much of that noise as possible with noise gates, but I don't want to also clip the audio. With that said, this is the virtual comic shop where we come to chat. We had an interesting chat on one of the comic book reviews just last week with an issue of Captain Marvel, when I talked about how it dives into a little bit, gets political, and of course has to paint Carol Danvers' father as some kind of Nazi, and how really that was never shown anything before, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And of course it triggered somebody, and the person was all triggered, not realizing I'm a Captain Marvel fan, and I had to put, hey, I'm a Captain Marvel fan, but I'm speaking what I feel is the truth about these issues. And I look into the person, and they've got for their avatar, they're themselves in a Captain Marvel suit. But here's the thing, it's not, this is a male that was complaining, and he's in the female Captain Marvel suit. I mean, can you not predict that? I mean, at least being the male Captain Marvel, so he probably doesn't realize there was a male Captain Marvel, for crying out loud. You gotta love how these people get triggered when they don't know what they're talking about. But let's dive in to a comic book and see if we can trigger some other people today. With the Ultimates issue 24, has 759 ratings, 3.7 score on League of Comics Geeks, mostly positive. And I gave him a close to it with a 3.6. The cover's okay. There's some open order covers that are decent too as well. The writer's Den's Camp and artist is Juan for Gary. Well, anyway, this issue takes place on Gamma Island, where a stripped of power, deeply frustrated Bruce Banner, he was cast out of Kunlun and losing his Iron Fist abilities, attempts to take out his opponents. And I mean, She-Hulk is there and all that. I mean, this is a fight issue, really, is what it all is, fighting, and it does not end well for the Hulk. So we're starting to get towards the end here of this series, and it shows it's good action, good art in this issue. The series is almost over, and I think that's a good thing. It is probably time for this one to end, but let's look at some other people say. Here's a 4-star, something very poignant about the Hulk. Born of an atom bomb, a perversion of man's desire to dominate and subjugate nature, fighting against the very fauna and flora of the island he perverted. Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. Yeah. Let's look at another one, 4-star. The fact that Den's Camp is also writing Endgame and will contribute to the finale means the Ultimates was probably never going to have a finale that felt completely closed. You know, that might be a good point. I wonder if this is going to feel like it has closure. I don't see a lot of bad here for this issue. It said it was pretty good, so here's a 3-star here. Yes, I understand Ultimate Endgame number 5 is the end, but it's hard to not read this and think, okay, last issue of the comic that got me back into reading comics. I don't understand that, but okay. It's bittersweet. I think it's an effective little story about the necessity of violence in times of crisis and revolutionary action. Okay, that's pretty interesting for a 3-star. With that said, it doesn't really have anything that's too terrible that I see here on League of Comics Geeks. It does have one, but I don't know the language. I can't read the language there for that 2-star. So whoever it is, I'm sorry I didn't share your views. Are you reading the Ultimates? I think it's time for this story arc to end personally. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear it in the comments. Next, let's talk about Superman, issue number 38. 1,066 ratings, 4.3 score on the League of Comics Geeks, and that's a little higher than I gave it, which is usual because I gave it a 4 because I thought the book is strong. Yeah, it's a strong book nonetheless. And the writer is Joshua Williamson, artist is Dan Mora. The cover, there's some other covers that are available that are okay, but I think there's nothing wrong with the standard cover with Witchfire on it. Yes, Witchfire is hot. Pun intended, people, right? There's solid art and it's a fun story here. There's some meta humor. I really did enjoy this issue. Anyway, because Clark Kent is temporarily out of the picture following the events of DC Knockout. Remember, he won the tournament. Superboy Prime here is still operating as Metropolis's primary defender, as he's trying to prove that he can be a legitimate, redeemed Superman. And so this issue then will dive more into that. And I enjoyed it. And looking at other people here, I do see some mixed reviews here. Here's a 4-star. The Superboy Prime storyline is proving to be so much fun. You could tell everyone involved is having a blast creating this story. The story doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows that Prime is a fourth wall breaking character, so the world is engineered in a way that accommodates that. You know, and I agree. But here's somebody that gives it only a 2.5 star. I was thinking something was really off about this arc, but I were unable to name it until now. The arc feels so flat because there's no real consequences, but I might give in to the idea that Prime somehow subconsciously affecting the continuity in a way that everyone accepts him with nearly no build-up, no real conflict. He always wanted to be a hero and have many friends, etc. Okay, I don't know about that necessarily. You gotta give a little intro to the character before you dive in too deep of an arc there. But let's look at a 3-star, right down the center. It's hard making a Superboy Prime boring, but Williamson somehow did it. Truly astonishing. At least better than last issue. I don't think there's a better way to describe the slop. Ooh, ouch, right? Let's try to end this on a more positive note with a 4.5 star. I really enjoyed the Witchfire story. I'm not familiar with this character, so I appreciated the brief character history that was provided in the story. And I love how it dovetailed into a story itself when the characters are chatting with each other, and Prime's like, so tell me about yourself. And boom, we get Witchfire's history. Yeah, I think that was a well done way of doing that. What are your thoughts? And what are your thoughts about this Witchfire character? I don't know much about her, but I thought this was quite interesting. Next, let's talk about Justice League Unlimited issue number 19 with 457 ratings, 3.6 score, mostly positive. I gave the book a 3.8, a higher score. What do you know? It finally happens, right? Doesn't happen often. The cover's okay, nothing spectacular. There is some alternate other covers that are available too that are hit and miss as well. The writer is Mark Waid, artist is Dan Mora for this issue. Well, what can I say? The core of this issue focuses on the immediate chaotic fallout of Justice League's new villain, and the top secret initiative that they have being leaked by Lex Luthor. Yeah, so, you know, this whole idea of taking villains and giving them a redemption arc is interesting, but you got to give it to Lex, right? He doesn't do things well when being told. He does things his own way. There's decent art here and a fun story. It's interesting, you know, that not all the League members agree with this new idea of redemption as well. So overall, I did not mind this book. As I said, I gave it a higher score than a lot of those did on the League of Comics Geeks. But let's check out some of those other people then and what their thoughts were. I see a 3-star here. The villain amnesty thing is not sitting right with me. And not even for it being wrong, but for it taking a comic that already doesn't have a clear focus or interesting character plots going on and giving it even more characters to build around. You know, that's a good point. I think the book does miss a little bit in that area. Here's a 4-star. This was a ton of fun, obviously. Mark Waid being the master storyteller that he is, of course. I wouldn't go that far with Mark Waid. He's hit and miss in my opinion, but then again, I'm a little bit biased. Here's a 3-star. You know, it could have been worse, actually. Even if the amnesty thing is not being explored in any depth, it's still much more digestible backdrop for the stories being told than the effing nonsense KO tie-ins were. A lot of those tie-ins were really not necessary. Let's look at a 3-star here. The amnesty storyline just feels like a bad idea, both in comic and for the series in general. Ooh. And let's try to look at something a little more positive to end this on with a 4-star. One of the stronger issues of the series in a while. It really plays well into the consequences of Lex going public with the amnesty program, and it creates a lot of chaos and headaches for the Justice League. Yeah, it pisses Batman off in this issue. Boy, Batman's like, glad he's not here, I'd punch him. So you definitely get that disconnect, and I think that's pretty interesting. I think it's one of the things that makes the story interesting is not everybody is on the same page in agreement with this amnesty project. If this seems interesting to you, check it out. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. The next issue I want to talk about didn't fare so well for DC. And it's Green Lantern issue 35, which this also bugs me because we took a series that was doing really great, and it seems to really drop the ball here lately. And I'm not the only one that thinks that, because it has 237 ratings with only a 2.9 score, which is mostly negative on League of Comics Geeks. And I actually give it a little higher with a 3, but that doesn't say a lot. The writer's Jeremy Adams and artist is Iguara. The cover, nothing special to be honest, and the other covers available, nothing special there either. Not really a big fan of what I've seen here. Now, the main plot is with Kyle Reiner being back on Earth as he's trying to get his civilian life back on track and break into the movie industry at this point, using his skills as an artist. And he's a bodyguard right now for this Time Bandit. And the Time Bandit feels, hey, maybe I can use this as a way to disappear. But it introduces a new threat, a new villain, a giant alien, which is a grotesque villain named Dr. Skin. And this person can change the looks of people greatly. Now, there's also another plot, and that's the more interesting plot of the two, and that's with Hal Jordan. But even that one doesn't do a great job. So I think that's the whole problem. There's two storylines, and nothing really sticks it well. Hal Jordan gets betrayed by money, only to be temporarily betrayed because, well, the bad guy isn't really a killer. He's just in it for the money, which is sort of lame. The Hollywood story, too, with Kyle Rayner is nothing spectacular, and that's the whole thing. The whole problem with it, everything just could be better. But let's look at some other people's views. Here's a 3-star. Wow, so only 3 issues in before the dual storytelling back and forth between Hal and Kyle basically ends, and one gets sucked into another's title. I dropped it for a reason. Ouch, okay. I don't understand that thought exactly, but it is what it is. Here's another 3-star. Adams Aguara spin a tale in Green Lantern 35 that finally takes Kyle Reiner and moves his story towards something real. Even so, the book suffers at the hands of already weak plot lines and a borderline cartoony art. And I agree there. The art is failing this book. Did not do it well. And as I said before, the stories are just meh for both. 2-star, very gross body horror inspired book that was very uncomfortable to read. However, I believe the topics of the social commentary that Jeremy Adams attempts to touch upon this issue of Hollywood and its obsession with body perfection is a serious issue that should be talked about more often. Yeah, it definitely shows you a lot of the take of the inside of Hollywood, how they all want body perfection and want to be changed. And let's be honest, how many people have changed themselves that look better? I think this is a mental illness thing. You are what you are. We have to learn to like that. Now, I'm not saying we can't get in better shape and things like that, right? But we don't need to be changing our faces and cutting ourselves up. I just don't understand that. Maybe we'll get some of that in this storyline. What are your thoughts about this issue? Because, boy, they're pretty negative overall. I'd like to know your thoughts. Next, let's shift into a Marvel comic, because we did a lot of DC ones there, didn't we? So let's talk about Wonder Man. Yes, Wonder Man. Issue number 3. 102 ratings, 3.7 score, mostly positive. I gave it the exact same score, too, as well. The writer is Jeremy Duggan and artist is Farhad Karmani. Now, there is some other covers that I think are better than the one we got here, but the one we got really actually fits. This story is different. The story is about Simon being back in Tinseltown trying to balance his acting career, which is not going well, with heavy hitting duties as being an Avenger. And, you know, we get some interesting things here. Like, he shoots this video to try to get a part. Doesn't work, but it actually helps the person that he was working with, Killerwatt, to possibly get the part. So it's things are not working for him. And also on top of that, we get a love scene here, kind of thing here, going a love thing with Hellcat Patsy Walker. Seems like Simon has a thing for redheads here, right? Really, we get a lot of fun energy in here. This is just a silly comic book. We get the Spot is a villain here. I mean, and he's an assassin. It's just fun, and for some reason it works. There's nothing real deep and dark here. It's just silly fun. And I don't know why I like it like I do, but for some reason I do. Decent art, but boy, I really think I get why they have this. They have green on Simon Williams' suit, throwback to his original suit, but get the green off. Just go with the black and red. It's better. We don't need that. Silly, charming story, but let's look what some other people have to say about it. This one says it's 3 stars. Actually, the whole story is just messy. This one was better than the previous one, though. I enjoyed the beginning, but it started to kind of fall apart in the middle. Then we have an interesting ending. Well, okay, not that interesting, but it made me gasp. Okay, another one. 3.5 stars. Spot is getting some nice airtime. Wonder Man and Miles Morales. It was an okay issue. It was time for Spot to be knocked out. It was great watching the Grim Reaper wreck the place. Yeah, that was a nice little thing there, too. Poor Simon can't get apart, but Killerwatt can? Yeah, that was an interesting thing with the video in there, buddy. I agree with you there. You gotta admit, that pissed Simon off. You could tell. It's like, really? I put in this. Also, the events in this was challenging. Simon Williams being a pacifist, which is good, because I think the whole thing of him being pacifist is stupid. He's one of the most powerful, strong characters. Let him knock something out, for crying out loud. Maybe there's something there I don't understand. Overall, the views of this are pretty mixed. But it tends to skew positive. So if you're a Simon Williams fan and you like a non-deep story, just some fun, this is probably going to be good for you. If you're wanting something deep, dark, or really interesting storytelling, this probably is a skip it. Overall, I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next issue. All right, here we go. My comic book of the week, The Infernal Hulk #7, with 419 ratings, 4.0 score on League of Comics Geeks, and I gave the book a 4.1. Yeah, just even slightly higher. I think the cover was good, though there is a couple open over covers that are good too. One of them in particular is fantastic in my opinion. Nonetheless, though, interesting book. Writer Philip Kennedy Johnson, artist Adam Gorham, and I'm telling you, I'm enjoying it. What else can I say? This has been great in my opinion here. Anyway, the ancient godlike entity known as the Eldest, who has hijacked Hulk's physical body, is actively trying to build a massive army. Yeah, and what he's done is he's sort of making sure he's got everything and all of his bases covered against all of our heroes here. I mean, we get the Infernal Hulk here versus the X-Men, and boy, does he catch the X-Men off guard. There's good art, and boy, there's some good brutal panels with fighting too. All the mutants are getting pulled in, if you will. How do I say it? They're getting like a mental kind of deal where they're getting pulled in to where the Hulk is, sort of like he's trying to control them. But the X-Men are trying to block that. Well, the Infernal Hulk captures the Leech and uses him as his power dampening ability to get to the X-Men, and pretty much takes one of the X-Men, Glob. And there's definitely something big building here. And of course, the other X-Men come, oh, Glob? Why did they take Glob? Well, evidently it's going to be something worse than they realize. But the big thing, I think, is the twist at the end. Banner goes to the Avengers, and he has a plan. But you know what that plan's probably going to lead to. He knows he's going to have to become the Hulk again, because it takes a Hulk to beat the Hulk. I think this is a great issue. The art was really, really fitting. It's dark. It was done well. The desperation, the seriousness of the event is all here. But let's look at some other people thought about this. 4.5 star. What an absolutely amazing comic. Yeah, I get it. The art is gruesome and grime with all that it encompasses, especially the beginning, which just sets the feel for what's about to go down for mutant kind. Absolutely. I agree. Here's a 3 star. Another fine issue, but the formula is stale to me at this point. I'm glad it seems like next issue we are moving forward after like 5 issues of pure power scaling action. Well, I don't agree with that. I think we're seeing the eldest build the army so we can see the threat here. Now, nonetheless, though, they did like the book. Let's look at a 4.5 star. Love seeing the Hulk crossover with the X-Men. It really lends itself to the idea of the Hulk truly being the strongest. When it wipes the floor with heroes he often doesn't interact with. Yeah, I think that's great. It reminds me of many, many years back when we seen the Smart Hulk, where he was wiping out the Avengers and everything. It was just like, this is easy because he's that powerful. And I think that's amazing. And let's look at a 3.5 star. I like this book, but these last issues have been at the same level of stretch as the last arc of Ultimate Wolverine. Like, I know it's a Hulk book and we want to see this guy fighting things, but after issue 3, the plot has been about Hulk or the eldest fighting random enemies. Well, what they're doing is they're building the scale of what he is, and this, in my opinion, makes sense. We can't have Bruce Banner going, okay, I finally got rid of being the Hulk. I'm going to be Hulk again because of this guy, because of a minor threat. They're showing that the X-Men couldn't stop him. The Avengers couldn't stop him. Nobody has been able to stop the Hulk. We have to set the threat at a good tone. And we've been seeing that, something dire enough to make Banner go, I'm going to have to do this again. And I think that's good storytelling. I've been loving this book, and that's why it's my issue of the week. And there you go, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this comic book review. Share your thoughts. Just remember, be kind. Don't be stupid, right? You can have different opinions and stuff, but don't come in guns a-blazing like Mr. I'm Captain Marvel Stan. I'm all mad because even though you liked the book, you had something that you didn't 100% agree with. I'm going to have to take off my female Captain Marvel suit now. The triggering event there for me, which wasn't really triggering, is he was mad because I had an opinion. And I was like, people are allowed to have an opinion here. That's the whole point of going into a comic shop and having discussion. You can say, I don't agree with that. This is my thoughts. No problem. Have an opinion. That's great. Don't police opinions. We need to hear everybody's opinions, even ones that we don't agree with, because that opens our eyes to other people's views. If we only surround ourselves with people that believe everything we do, we're never going to learn. We'll never change. We'll never be able to even enforce our views and potentially change others. It's sort of hard to change somebody's mind on something when the first thing you do is you go in attacking them. That doesn't make any sense. It just builds barriers. This is a comic shop. We're talking comics. Let's have some fun. And speaking of fun, thank these people, because without them, this channel wouldn't be possible, right? Thank the subscribers, the supporters, all that. Thank you, everybody. And until next time, keep it frugal.